An apple a day keeps the doctor away, but a glass of OJ keeps the adversary at bay. Here's Oddjob. Hey, it's time for a glass of OJ, and I'm Oddjob.
And I'm DNSPrincess.
So, you all have asked for it based on previous polls I've run. Some of you are wanting collabs, so I have brought someone to collab. And we're actually going to break down a bit of a topic that everyone seems to be has interesting takes on, has confusion about. So it's good to have a video to talk about it, and especially talk about it with someone who's an expert on all things pen testing. And we're going to talk about pen testing. But before we get into talking, I think it's important just to remind everybody that these are our opinions personally. And these opinions and things we're about to say don't necessarily represent vendors, companies, or people who may be paying us for our day jobs. But at the same time, this video is not sponsored by anybody. This is completely our opinion and what we think and feel, independent of what else everyone else has to say. So, little disclaimer there. Nobody's paying us to say these things, and they don't necessarily represent what our employers believe. So, yeah, so it's going to be a two-parter. This one is going to go through the intro about pen testing and what things get wrong, what people get wrong about it, the different types of pen tests, how long should they take, all these different questions which a lot of people have going into a pen test, and that's kind of when you're kind of probably too late to start asking a lot of these questions, is right when you need a pen test.
Yeah.
So let's get started then with the different types of pen tests. What types of pen tests do we see out there?
Well, there are a couple different types when you break down pen tests, and I think the first one we were talking about is a scope-based type, which you have aptly shared the new terminology with me, which is transparent, translucent, and opaque, replacing the spectrum that we had before.
Which used to be, by the way, white box, gray box, and black box. And Mr. Minion, shout out to him for reminding me that there's other words we can use. And so I've started using the words transparent, translucent, and opaque, which is far more descriptive about how that actually works.
Exactly. So kind of to break it down a little bit, just so we can all have the same terminology. Transparent would be white box, as much information as you can give, as much information that can be imparted to the tester. They should have access to like architectural diagrams, API specs, code, different things like that. Help make a transparent test. Opaque would be the opposite, or the black box test. Absolutely no knowledge is another way to call that. And then translucent somewhere in the middle.
Right. Yeah. And so why would you want those different ones?
There are good reasons to have all of them. Opaque is the one that matches or simulates attackers best. Attackers from the outside don't have access or shouldn't have access to your internal information.
They get better recon. That's what they're supposed to do. Is
yes.
Recon they generate.
Yes, exactly. But it also takes a little bit more time. You need to give time to the tester to be able to do all that recon. So you can save a little bit of time by going translucent. So that gray box test, so they still don't have everything. They might not have access to code. They might not have access to diagrams or anything like that, but they have something to give them a little bit of information. Usually in a translucent, I see credentials. Low-level credentials is an example. And then transparent would be access to all different user roles and types. All that documentation I mentioned before, and you would pick that when you want, I don't want to say easy. How would you say you want an easy pen test or a quicker pen test? A more efficient pen test.
Yeah, I mean, what you're really trying to do there, I guess, is really expose what features are available in the application. So that they can test those. If you're not aware of certain functionality on the back end or source, what could be on the source code, even just having the SBOM from your software could help somebody determine, it doesn't need to be million line of code, but, oh, they're using that library in there. I bet you it's being front-ended this way. If I pass these arguments back, I might be able to trigger something. Or this is the way it looks like permissions are being handled. And so by doing that, what you do is you take the time for them to discover the way your app works down, and probably the less time someone has to spend on your pen test, the more value you can get out of it. And you know, it's because again they're discovering more about your application, and they're discovering more test surface area really of where they can get to it. Whereas spending all that time reconning, spending all that time scanning, spending all that time analyzing what you got to figure out what you might have back there, really gets to the heart of let's fix issues before the attacker can even have to do all that recon and discover it themselves.
Mm-hmm. And just to make a note, it doesn't have to be an app. We can pen test a lot of different things: networks, products, Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. You can even do medical devices. You can do OT devices. There's all kinds of devices out there that need to be pen tested because some of them connect by Bluetooth, some of them connect by serial, some of them, yep, exactly, and some of them connect over Wi-Fi. And so you want to be able to determine, you know, what devices are what. Some are just embedded Windows or Linux devices. Well, a lot of them are embedded Linux, but some of them are embedded Windows devices. And it's like, well, how can I get to that embedded OS fast is usually a thing you want to figure out. But yeah, it's not just an app, right, that you necessarily are going to pen test. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's the cloud. Yeah. Sometimes you just want to get into the cloud.
I feel like this is a good time to point out, in case we can't later, that cloud penetration testing should not be mixed up with internal network penetration testing. Aha. They are different. But we can go into that later. I just want to throw that little wrench out there.
Stay tuned for part 2 where we jump into that more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, let's just say we're going to do apps, though, for right now. Just
absolutely.
Make it easy.
Absolutely. So, you know, we've got different methodologies we can then engage in, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we were talking about 3 kind of gradients to this methodology. We have fully automatic, full manual, and partial manual. And one thing I want to bring up when I say full manual is that does not mean a lack of reconnaissance. No pen test can go out with some level of scripting or automation unless you want to be very painful, pay for millions of hours, and all sorts of stuff like that. So full auto, I think, is a little controversial. Start with that. What are your opinions on fully automatic pen tests?
Well, I'm pretty sure the ATF has a few things to say about full auto. It's a bad joke. But no, the full auto, I think, you know, when we talk about pen tests and we talk about full auto, some people just dismiss it as it's just yet another scan. And, you know, at some point, things are going to get automated. Things are going to get abstracted as we understand more, as we can more repeatedly exploit and discover issues in people's environments. We're getting to that deeper level of understanding environments. And the more we do that, the more we can automate, the more we can make our lives easier. You know, doing fully automatic pen tests, to me, can be a good way of covering the things that are already low-hanging fruit, covering the things that are already basics. You know, it kind of goes back to, you know, we used to say, and we probably still do, you know, do you really need a pen test or do you just need a vuln scan to get started?
Exactly.
Which we can talk about that, but it's going to become to the point where do you really need a partial manual or full manual pen test, or can you even pass the automated pen testing tools first?
Yeah.
So it's stepping up the ability. It's making it more efficient to take care of those things that you're going to find in a full manual or partial manual pen test, get those out of the way, and now you can really get a lot more value out of those full manual and partial manual. So I find full auto is a great way to enhance value of future pen tests, because hopefully now you're going to find stuff that's not easily repeatable. It's going to be specific to your app. It's going to be someone going through and saying, oh, yeah, I see it now. I'm going to have to iterate probably through 5 or 6 or 10 different ways of doing this one exploit to just try and see what lands on your thing. Whereas the full auto may just have 1 or 2 of those iterations.
And I think we'll touch on this on part 2 with our $ gradients. But these methodologies also directly relate to the level of effort, or like field work, hands-on keyboard, whatever you want to call it. So full auto is also a good choice for people who maybe have a limited budget, who can't afford that whole hands-on keyboard time. I want to introduce you to a phrase, the partial manual. and you can decide how you feel about it. But we can also refer to partial manual as human in the loop.
Okay.
So you think about like full automation going through, and there's actual like human intervention of that automation. So it's different than full manual, which would be obviously like manual penetration testing, less reliant on scripts, more so on like pattern recognition and human ability to pen test. Partial manual or human in the loop is really cool because you get the best of both worlds. You get the efficiency of fully automatic pen testing, but the eyes and knowledge of a person.
Got you.
So that's a
so someone may look at full auto example and say, that didn't work.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can get it to work. And so now we take something that you think, that's PHP 5, that should have worked. Let's see what's going on over here. Take a further look into that and, see if there's gold to be mined out of this.
Yeah, and a benefit to the human in the loop aspect, and we'll talk about this probably later, is validation. So fully automatic pen tests can just tell you or describe certain patterns or signatures it finds, and then do some form of penetration testing. And I think we were talking about an example earlier with library names, how typically automated pen tests or even vulnerability scans look for library names, and if you were even to just change that in a software application, it may not be detected. Whereas a person's like, that's a vulnerable library. I know that one.
Yes. Security through obscurity is not going to get you very far.
No.
May fool the bots, but it won't fool a human so much.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's good. The next part that I'll let you start off with is objective-based versus scoped-based pen testing.
Yeah, you just taught me about this, which is, pen tests really kind of have two forms. Scoped, where I understand that what you really want to do is you want to limit down what you're testing. So either it's a network segment or a collection network segments. We're not just doing 10/8.
Yeah.
we're going specifically. Maybe you have a specific scope, like maybe you have like an ISO framework area and you want to scope that. Maybe it's your OT area and you want to focus on that. Maybe it's your PCI environment, you want to focus on that. But you've got, maybe it's just your public facing apps and you just want to focus on those types of things. So we have a scoped environment. Whereas an objective based is going to be, free season or overall free season. But what we really want you to do is grab domain admin, or we have this piece of very important IP over here we want you to grab over in some database, but you've got to figure out how to get there and grab it, and can you do it within a certain amount of time. So really what you're doing there, that'll then start kind of determining not just the form of that pen test, but what level of effort and work goes into that pen test then, right? Are you going to have full coverage of vulnerabilities? Like if someone sees a whole bunch of vulnerabilities, are they going to exploit every single one of them? In an objective base, probably not.
Right.
In a scoped, they're definitely going to say, "Oh, we've solved vulnerabilities. We're going to try to exploit them."
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Scope pen tests are usually coverage based, so you're trying to find as many vulnerabilities as possible. Yeah. This is what you use when you have like a check the box assessment or compliance. Typically, objective based are more and mature, I would say, and more due diligence driven.
Sometimes can be driven by very specific questions, like can we withstand, are we resilient enough that we could withstand focused effort by an advanced adversary for 3 weeks? If someone wanted to pay attention to us for 3 weeks for some reason, within that 3 weeks, could they get that? Or maybe it's a matter of, would my controls notice and stop that? Maybe you're wanting to do that, which starts getting into purple teaming or some of those other types of exercises that are a bit more advanced than what we usually think of than a pen test.
Right.
And sometimes people have different words they use for a pen test versus adversary simulation versus red team versus purple team. And there's all kinds of gradients in between.
There are, absolutely. I've heard scope be called one thing, objective based be called another.
Right.
We'll deal with that later. But OJ, I love being contradictory. I love saying, or contrarian. I love being contrarian. What are pen tests not? Okay. sort of hot takes. The first thing pentests are not that I think a lot of people use in place of pentests because they think they're cheaper are bug bounties.
Okay.
Yeah, bug bounties are not pentests. And I think what people want to have bug bounties for is they think it's fastest because the bug bounty hunters are being paid for their first, whoever submits it first or anything like that. So there's some implication that it's faster than a pen test. It's faster to finding one specific vulnerability that someone can get paid out on.
Right.
And they don't really care. One thing I've found is that with bug bounty, you want to submit first.
Right.
So you want to submit anything that you find.
Right.
But at the same time, you might want to hold on to a couple things in your back pocket because they become more valuable later. So you kind of have to determine, like, is someone else going to find that vuln? Like, what's going to happen? They're not pen tests.
Right. Bug bounties to me are just more of a mature vulnerability disclosure program.
Yeah.
Right. So that's really what we're going towards over there is, we encourage you to find issues with our product. We encourage you to find issues with our environment. It's more the crowdsourcing of your bug finding and everything, but you're correct. It's not a pen test because they're not going to go through and give you a full report of all the issues. They're going to report by the issue. Exactly. And say, hey, I was able to bypass authentication. I got into this person's account on Facebook or name any social media app. And there may be a price point for a particular category of app that you said. And a lot of these bug bounty programs allow for that. And you can either buy into a vendor-based bug bounty program, or you can just have one of your own that you run where you say, we'll pay out for this if you meet this criteria. And so there's all kinds of ways to make that happen. But right, bug bounties are definitely not a pen test. I mean, hey, no one's reported a bug so far, so we've passed our pen test, right?
It must be buttoned up.
That's right. So yeah, it makes no sense once you start thinking about it that, yeah, this is not truly a pen test. Although it's interesting, some firms that are more on the automatic pen testing products, some of them are starting to offer what I would think are more dedicated bug bounty services, really, where they say, oh, we've got like a whole pool or a whole team of people in the background that they're not focused on your account. They're focused on loads of accounts. And then from time to time, they'll just pay attention to your app at some point and maybe bring something up to you. And that's starting to me in the market. I'm like, I don't know if that's really truly continuous pen testing or any of those other types of phrases that we could come up with. But it's now still more towards, well, now you're just kind of dedicated bug bountying, or you have a limited pool of people who are doing a bug bounty. It's just more on your network side rather than more of a public pool of people like, two of the big bug bounty programs out there are that are commercially available. We don't try to name vendors here. If they're open source, but we try not to name vendors here. Yeah. Protect the innocent and the guilty.
For real. So another thing that pen tests aren't are breach and attack simulation, or BAS.
Ooh,
BAS.
okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, however you want to say it. Someone's going to be like, it's base. I don't know. I don't care. Breach and attack simulation. This is also different than a pen test because it is mimicking an adversary, even though the adversary is a common frame of mind for pen testing. Breach and attack simulation is kind of like objective-based pen test, where it's very specific, but it's so specific that it only has like one.
You're narrowing your methodology.
Right. It's such a narrow methodology, it can't be a pen test. Usually you're following a TTP or a certain threat actor you're trying to mimic.
Right.
And it's different than a pen test because we're not here looking for vulnerabilities or weaknesses.
Okay.
Yeah, we're here to meet a specific objective, however you get there. And what makes it different than an objective-based pen test is objective-based pen testing usually has some sort of like, not like a set scope. I'm trying to like just make these words distinct.
So a pen test essentially is where a pen test, what differentiates a pen test and a breach and attack simulation to you is when you want to restrict heavily the methodologies of the pen tester itself, you're talking about breach and attack.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to limit what they're allowed to touch necessarily, that's probably more of a pen test? You know, by scoping or saying we want you to achieve, you know, get certain things within the environment.
Yeah, it might be helpful to rename objective-based pen testing to what some people call it is just a red team exercise.
Right.
Breach and attack simulations are like red team exercises and can be considered a type.
Right.
But a red team exercise probably has like an objective that is more freeform, like you were mentioning domain admin.
Right.
So achieve domain admin by any means possible is a red team. Mimic this specific threat actor, do this specific methodology as a breach and attack simulation.
Got you. So do you think there's an umbrella term here of pen tests that encompasses this, or is it more of offensive security as the umbrella term, and then you've got pen tests, and then you've got kind of these I don't want to say like again more umbrellas nesting here, but there's kind of these cousins, if you will,
I like
that follow under the pillar of offensive security.
Offensive security does mean a lot of things, and I think you're right. This could cover all of them.
Yeah.
Some people also might call it security auditing, using the big A word.
I'm not a favor of that.
I don't like it either. I'm glad that you have that opinion.
Because now all I think of are checklists and evidence and everything else like that. Like, oh, show me that you had this, and no. And then show me the evidence that you gathered the evidence. When you gathered the evidence, and how did you track the gathering of the evidence?
Hey, OJ, show me there's no evidence.
Oh.
That's a whole other topic. I'm sure someone's going to be a little controversial about breach and attack simulation just because it is so close to other terms. But that's what it's not. It's also not my favorite thing it gets confused with.
Oh, yeah?
Pen testing is not a vulnerability scan.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I would go so far to say as validated vuln scans are also not pen tests.
Okay.
Yes. If there's a difference we were kind of alluding to earlier about full auto versus vulnerability scanning, right? The difference between fully automated penetration testing and vulnerability scanning is the actual execution of exploitation.
Right.
So no exploitation, just the vuln scan. Even if you say, hey, let's get a vuln scan and then exploit what we find, you're leaving so much on the table. It's uncomfortable the amount you're leaving on the table. When I mentioned earlier, like a scoped penetration test is supposed to be coverage based. If you do a validated vuln scan, you're missing out on everything that a vulnerability scanner could not find.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're really limiting yourself to, hey, here's
vuln scans are not your only discovery method for potential ways to exploit.
But you brought up earlier, it's a great way to eliminate low-hanging fruit.
Right.
And it is. And we'll kind of get to that later. Maybe you should start with a vuln scan before a pen test.
Right.
Well, there's so many reasons why. We can go that later.
So, you know, we've heard about, you know, some of the folks, some of the different pen tests, some of the things not pen tests. Yeah. Who are the types of folks who are doing pen tests?
Yeah, there are a lot of different players in this space. These terms are kind of like slang, right? There might be better terms out there, but I think these will get the point across. So first we have the mom and pop shops. Yeah. Typically these are like 2, 3, 4 employees, really small, looking to just start up a company. Maybe they like being that size. Maybe they want to grow into a bigger company. But there are just a few testers.
I'd say 20 would be pushing the limit to where you go to the next one. Really shouldn't be any more than 20 people.
Yeah. I think mom and pop also implies some amount of like participation and ownership. Whereas that's exactly the opposite of like a big box company.
Right.
Yeah. Big box, you probably know the name. That's why
the Walmarts of pen testing.
Yeah, the Walmarts of pen testing.
The multi-conglomerates, the P&Gs, all those different people of pen testing. And we probably know a lot of names and who they are.
Yeah. I like to think of more like the Costco of pen testing.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's a little nicer.
No membership needed, though.
No membership needed. Well...
Oh, well, true. There are some subscription ones,
Yeah. Okay, so we also have boutiques, which are usually like 20 to a couple hundred, maybe. Not big box yet. Typically has like either like less brand recognition or maybe just less volume, right? These boutiques really usually cover like custom stuff. They specialize in a more narrow area, want to be like really specific in terms. So you're not going to get like all the options of a big box store.
Right.
Some interesting things about the big box store, they probably have other services wrapped up with it. You can get your pen test here and your IR, and we'll make your BCP for you.
Right. And we'll do that SOC 2 audit for you.
Exactly.
And everything else.
Boutique services try to narrow in on like a few services, if not one.
Yeah. And usually they're going to be very good at that one thing. You know, and the good stores will tell you, you know, what they're not good at.
Yeah.
And they'll usually, if they're good, and we'll talk about red flags in video too, so you'll want to stay tuned for that one. They'll tell you when a green flag is, hey, we could do that. We are not good at it.
Yeah.
So we're not very well established in that. So just to let you know, but yeah, we can take a crack at this.
Yeah, boutiques sometimes have partnerships too with other boutiques.
Right.
So it's like, hey, we'll do the pen test, they'll do your IR, and like we're friends.
Exactly.
You know?
And as long as they're being upfront about it.
Yeah.
It's all
absolutely.
good. But yeah, established boutiques to me are folks who have put in the time and effort to grow a team, to get a little bit of diversity in their talent sets, and be able to do that. But what they're big enough to do is they're big enough to handle you as a big client that may have some pretty meaty scopes. But they are also nimble and small enough to focus on you as a client and to treat you as truly special to them because, well, you know, they don't have 3,000, 4,000 customers.
Exactly.
They have a few hundred at most. And they very much focus on, you know, making sure they've done the right thing for you. You go to a big box store, you're just the 200th customer that week they're doing a pen test for.
Right.
And they've got some team that could be anywhere in the world, depending on requirements. You know, there's a lot that can be mixed up there. You don't know the talent set of the people necessarily. There's not a known pedigree. Whereas with a mom and pop or even an established boutique, you have a known pedigree as to who's actually there. I hate saying pedigree because it's not like dog breeding or anything, but you know a little bit more about who the pen testers are. Whereas in a big box store, it's far more nebulous because these are like, you know, again, they're the big box stores. They're 10,000, you know, 30,000, 100,000 employee companies.
Right. And with the big box store, kind of like, fun fact, everyone, one of our favorite things to do is go shopping. So let me allude this to some shopping methodology for you. If we go to a big box store, you have so many choices. You can get choice fatigue. Right?
Oh, that's true.
But you can't customize anything. You have to buy what's on the shelf.
True.
Like, what they say is what you get. At an established boutique, like my favorite handbag brand, you can get things made to order.
Exactly.
You can get very specific instructions. You can get the orange flap, the brass hardware, the white pocket, the monogram, you know, like you can get all that. Whereas you can't really with a big box store. You're kind of shoehorned in. Mom and pop really can go 50-50. Mom and pop shops are usually so dedicated and they're trying to like establish clientele. They're going to bend over backward a little bit, but do they have the ability to bend?
And that's the thing. That's where you can notice a red flag there at some point. Again, we'll talk more about red flags, but, you know, is the mom and pop a bit too desperate? You know, are they trying to stretch beyond their capability in order to keep that sales going? Because that's what a lot of those up-and-comers want. They want customers. They need revenue. They need cash. Sometimes they'll be desperate to take any job. Yeah. Even if they can't do a good job. Or an odd job. So, but they're different sizes of companies. But which one are the mills, right? Where do the mills come from? Are they the mom and pops? Are they established boutique? The big box stores? Where do the mills come from?
Unfortunately, they can be at like any size.
Dang
it. You can't look at a pen test company and try to establish what it is just off the size. And
we'll actually talk about red flags in the second video. That'll really help you understand and give you better. It's a bit of a vibe check.
It's a vibe check.
Does this really feel like a more of a mill, or does this really feel more like somebody who knows what they're doing and is being upfront and is going to be good quality?
Right, and I think one thing that is unfortunate about mills being at any size is that you could say, oh, I know that big box brand. Everyone knows that big box brand.
Exactly.
It's secretly a mill.
Or they have a mill team they threw you off to, but they have a really good team. That's the problem, I think, with the big box store is you don't know if you're going to go to the mill team or if you're going to get the, you know, the super, you know, I don't know, the A team, you know, or whatever. So you don't know. Established boutique, it's harder to hide yourself as a mill because you don't have that many people. It's kind of easy. Oh, you're that person, you know, specifically. I know that person is... Oh yeah, they're completely new to pen testing or whatever. So you know what's going on here. Mom and pop, no way to hide you're a mill. No way to do. But big box stores, it's a lot harder to know when they're actually a mill or not.
Yeah, and kind of when we were defining established boutiques, we were like, oh, they have a very specific skill set. They do things very specifically. It's kind of antithetical to milling in general.
Right.
Why? What are we like calling a mill, or like what can you also call it? I guess would be like a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
They are going to do your pen tests in a week, and it's going to cost $5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not even a $1 sign, just grayed out dollar sign. They'll do it for a slice of pizza. So I always tell people, like, you need a wireless test. They'll do it for a slice of pizza.
Yeah.
But they're typically very price focused, very speed focused. So your project enablement time on mills is usually very short. It's usually like very low scope. And like I said, is really focused on, oh, your budget is 10 grand, your budget's whatever. Right. We're going to match that. You were kind of saying we shouldn't refer to pedigree because this is a dog breeding, but like think about producing like anything like a mill.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just as many pen tests as they get out.
Exactly.
They usually have a lot of revenue. Doesn't mean it's a good sign.
That's the whole idea of being a mill is you're trying to go cash as fast as possible, right?
Yeah.
So if you can zip through, 10 pen tests in a week with one person.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of tempting as a buyer because you want your pen test done now?
Well, and then that's the thing is why would you order a pen test to begin with, right?
Exactly.
And so now you're getting into, and of course you and I've both dealt with, oh, you didn't realize you had obligations to have a pen test, and now you're in, Q4 and it's, oh, you got to do that annually. Oh crap, we didn't do that. And so now can you do a pen test tomorrow?
Yeah.
So there's that. There is demand out there for that because of desperation by companies to do something to check that box.
Yeah.
And because pen testing is not really, there's no governmental that I've seen at least, no governmental or legal definition of what is a pen test, such that if you put just pen test in a contract, a lot of times, unless it's really defined in your policy or something, you're not actually going to be able to say, oh, that wasn't really a pen test.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, a lot of people have been able to kind of wiggle in all things that are pen test adjacent or almost pen tests or half pen tests and pass them also as pen tests. And that's what these mills really thrive on is that compliance driven, very heavy, like scare. Oh no, we didn't get our pen test this year. We've got so much of a budget. And they really get to that. And like you said, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
But really, if you want to avoid a mill, I think one of the things you should think of is why are you ordering a pen test to begin with?
Exactly.
Why even do a pen test?
Let's not.
Let's not.
See, you would do a pen test for a lot of reasons. I think one thing you can divide it up into is goals and drivers. Drivers are what's pushing you to do the pen test, and goals are your aspirations, and those can be the same or they can be different.
Okay.
So, like, a driver would be something like a SOC 2 audit's coming up.
Right.
Or you are trying to do, like, PCI DSS. Like, you need a PCI segmentation test.
Yep.
Stuff like that. And then a goal would be, I want you to display this PII is safe.
Right.
Or I want due diligence. I really want to make sure it's safe. I care about my customers. Like this is driven by the company. So you can have a lot of different goals and drivers, and they're really important to set out first. And we'll talk about that when we talk about like getting ready for a pen test.
Right.
But your goals and drivers are super important. So figuring out what those are will tell you why you need a pen test. Now, why would you need specifically a pen test versus a vulnerability scan versus a BAS versus a red team, whatever you want to call it, depends on your scope, your goals, lots of different topics. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, another driver is, or another goal you could really just have is, it could be an outcome.
Yeah.
It could be, we want to scare our board.
Yeah.
Our board is not sufficiently aware of and concerned enough about what our, you know, product issues are, or network issues are, or environment issues are, that are material risks to the organization. And they're just basically like, we're not convinced. Well, here, for some reason, they hire you and pay you 5 figures, 6 figures, whatever, and hire a whole team to basically tell them what they should be doing and not doing. And they go, well, we're not convinced. Hire a third party to come tell us the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And then we'll invest money. So we got to spend more money in order to spend more money in InfoSec, or just, well, I say InfoSec, but honestly, better IT practices and better development practices and better environment practices in order to, you know, affect a higher level of assurance and security. And, you know, scaring your board, unfortunately, is something that still has to happen from time to time. Just depends on your organization. But scaring your board, I mean, through the aughts and through the early 2010s, that was the big thing that everyone was buying a pen test for, was simply to have a report to show the board, here's all these issues. They got this data. They owned us. They completely got in and destroyed our environment. We need to fix this. It
reminds me of something that I think is interesting to point out, which is the attitude of a pen test. Different from a goal and a driver. I have seen new security leadership come in, and they want everything. They want to uncover every dirty piece of laundry they have, every nook and cranny.
Find the skeletons.
So they can find out where to start. To trying to get a lay of the land and figure out all the problems that they came into. Whereas maybe older leadership, or leadership that's been there for a minute, is sometimes more hesitant to do so. Because it's like, oh, what have we been keeping? What's wrong? You know. It really depends on the attitude. I've seen the opposite though. I've seen leadership that has been in place in a company for a really long period of time, and they're like, we care, and every year they're getting their pen test. Every year they're checking those boxes, and more so, you know. So I can't really say it's all leadership, but definitely I've noticed with new leadership, they want all the bells and whistles and start that budget fat.
And I mean, some people, you know, stay away from pen testing or other types of assessments because we don't want to know. And if I don't see it, then I'm not negligent for not doing something about it. If I don't know about it, ignorance is bliss. And when someone finally does show me, well, how were we supposed to know that? How are we? But I think nowadays that's not going to be that's not going to really be a argument that gets to fly in places such as court or regulators. When they ask the question, did you ever do a pen test on this? When was your last pen test on this area or this scope? And you go, well, we never did a pen test. That is now probably going to be considered, not doing a pen test is going to be considered negligence, because you are supposed to be assessing. This is a very common, pretty regular practice that one should be doing. It's a very well-established practice. And so, and it varies. As we've talked about, there's methods, there's different things to do with it. So you may not be able to catch everything, but surely if you were to at least have assessed this app or this product, you would have seen this.
Right. And I definitely think with getting a pen test in general, it's like, okay, I am ready to accept that there are problems.
Right.
If you're not ready to accept that your environment, your app, or whatever has a problem, you're probably not ready for the results of a pen test. Even if you're like, I have to get one because my customer says so, or my board says so, like, you have to be prepared for it. And I think a lot of people just aren't. And I know I'm skipping to the next one a little bit, but we can like flip that around.
Sure.
Yeah. So like, let's talk about high level readiness. Like,
yeah. How do you know when you're ready for a pen test, or what do you got to do to get ready? Not for the exercise itself, but just for the whole process of what kind of pen test do I want and everything else. How do we know we're ready to begin engaging with someone on a pen test?
Let's circle back to goals and drivers.
Right.
Those things tell you what type of pen test you need. If you're going to do something pen test adjacent, things like that. And we talked about objective based and scope.
Right.
So you better start out with an objective or a scope. Without those things, if you're just saying, oh, I need one, you're really shooting in the dark.
Yeah. You should not let your vendor, regardless of who they are, determine what pen test you're going to get. You need to be the one. You're the customer. You need to be able to determine what pen test you need to go get. And sometimes, we said it before, sometimes what you really don't need to start off with is a pen test. Sometimes you're going to find out you spent, I don't know, 65 grand, 100 grand, 200 grand on a pen test when really almost everything they found could have just been found with, a quick scan of, a quick in-map scan, or any kind of scan that would have been able to tell you, oh yeah, based on these versions of products you have out there, here's all your weaknesses, and they're all exploitable. All that stuff can be found. You probably ought to do that first. Obviously still check your boxes if you have to for regulation or compliance, but when you want to get serious about a pen test that's going to deliver a lot of value, help you achieve objectives, regardless of your drivers, that's I think when you're ready to begin engaging at that level is, hey, we already know some of the low-hanging fruit. We were already taking care of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're not ready when one, and I know this one is a little controversial, I'm sorry to say it, you're not going to like it, when you're not ready to pay for it.
Oh, got you.
Right. It's kind of like buying your first car.
Yeah.
Right? Not everyone has the money for a car yet. You got to start out on that bike or that motorcycle.
Yep.
But pen tests should not be your cheapest option. Let's revisit the mill conversation.
Yes.
They might be.
Yes.
They might be. But it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
You're not ready if you haven't done a vuln scan before, in my opinion. That's an Alyssa opinion. I don't think you should do a pen test without doing a vuln scan first.
I think so.
Yeah. I don't think you should do a pen test, like I said, if you're not ready to remediate. That means not only like operationally.
Oh, that's a good point.
Like having your remediation team.
Because what happens after the findings come out?
Exactly.
What do we do?
And typically with pen tests, if you do have a remediation test included, have a window. So like 90 days is really common.
Right.
Or a month or 6 months. You better fix it within that time period. So you better know who's going to fix it.
And the longer the time period, though, for fixing, because that pen test is point in time. That's an assessment. The longer the time goes on, some of those findings can no longer be valid.
Exactly.
Because maybe your app team was already working on an upgrade. Maybe they were already working on the next release, and that included an upgrade to that one binary that caused something to be exposed. So, those types of things happen, and you might find in 6 months your findings really are hit or miss or not even valuable anymore. So I think 90 days is probably really the best rule of thumb. Your criticals, whatever you get. That goes into the next video where we say, what's a critical?
Yeah.
We're going to go into a pen test, or just kind of, hey, so now you're ordering a pen test. What goes into that, and what should you be prepared to do? And one of those things is, criticals. How fast are you planning to fix them? Highs, same thing. Because, 90 days may be what you do for all of them, but you're probably going to want to fix some of them faster.
I can't remember who said it on Mastodon, but someone said if you're not ready to fix critical vulnerabilities within 24 hours, you shouldn't make it internet facing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To me, my heart, that feels extreme.
Yeah. Well, it's Mastodon.
Yeah, that feels extreme, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. Well, a giant leap in the right direction.
But like when I say be ready for remediation, I also mean like emotionally. And I know that's kind of hard to hear. No one wants their baby to be called ugly.
Right.
So you might receive a pen test with highs and criticals, and you're like, it was really that bad? So you're still trying to take down that. Yeah. Take down the level because you're like, is it really that bad?
Right.
You have to be prepared for your baby to be called ugly. It's a good thing, though.
Yes.
Yeah. Babies grow up.
It's a good thing. Martha Stewart.
Yeah.
The Martha Stewart pen test.
Ooh, that's a boutique pen test right there.
I want that pen test. I want my next pen test to be Martha Stewart.
Yeah. I want a Martha Stewart pen test.
Hey, the best pen testers went to prison, right?
We'll get into that, actually.
I love that I brought up.
We'll go there.
I love
get there. I think you're also not ready for a pen test if you don't have enough buy-in, right?
Good point.
Right. So like,
are you even going to be able to remediate this stuff?
Right.
If it's brought up.
Well, usually remediation also costs money. It costs man hours. You might have that pen test, but your board might say, tough cookies, we don't have another security engineer.
Right.
Along with vulnerability scanning especially, which I said you should get before a pen test, you have to filter out all those results because vulnerability scans have a lot of false positives with them.
Right.
So you may not even have the engineering to get a vulnerability scan done.
Right.
How are you going to get a pen test done?
Exactly.
And then pen tests themselves also require support from like on-call people in case anything gets knocked over or there is a critical and it needs to be fixed today.
Right.
So without buy-in from a bunch of people, you're not going to get the support you need for a pen test.
Good pen testers will actually pick up the phone and call you and say, we saw a pretty big issue that's under attack right now. Yeah. You know, sometimes people find out they're breached because they're doing a pen test, and all of a sudden the pen tester calls them up and says, somebody else is in your house right now.
It ain't me.
It ain't me, but I found them doing the exact same things I'm doing to you right now. So let's now turn this into light IR engagement too and help you like close them out and figure out what's going on. Those are good pen test firms will help you with that kind of a
I saw a customer once that was responding because they think they had an incident, right? And and they confuse pen testing with IR.
Oh, interesting.
Right, because they think, oh, if you do a pen test, you should be able to find them, right?
No.
I mean,
red team is offensive and defensive really are two different mindsets. Many ways. You always want a little bit of both on each sides. You know, if you're offensive, you need a defensive mindset in some ways because you want to think about what they've got in place. How can I get around it? And if you're defensive, you want to think, okay, great, I've caught them here. Now, what's their next goal? What's their objective? What are they trying to get to next? Oh, I'm trying to detect people. How are they going to look in my environment? What are they going to go after? Where there's vectors? Where's their foothold? You want to think with the other side in mind. But I've never thought, oh, incident response, I need to talk to pen testers because they're the people who break in. Yeah. That's interesting. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, no. Obviously, we don't name names.
Right.
But, yeah, no, it's definitely happened. And I also think you're not ready for a pen test when you yourself haven't defined, like, any sort of clear scope, objective. We kind of mentioned all those things before, but you need to, like... Okay, now I'm having a hard time putting it to words. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
You're not ready for a pen test, I guess, when you don't want it.
Yeah.
Like, if you're doing it for compliance only, are you doing security for compliance only?
Right.
Because that's a little ugly. You're going to get results.
And quite frankly, the good pen test firms are going to see you as a red flag.
Yes.
Because right now we're talking more as the buyer. You know, this isn't a buyer's guide, but any good buyer's guide would probably include a lot of these conversations. But that's probably going to be a red flag on the side of a pen test firm is these people are not serious. These people aren't ready for a pen test. You might even get pushback. If you aren't ready for a pen test, you will get firms that go, we are not doing a pen test for you. We'll do a vuln scan for you. We'll do this for you. You are not ready for this at all. And some of them are principled because they don't want you to waste your money with them. Sometimes they don't want their name established and attached to a report that goes with whatever the hell you just scoped. They've got too much pride. They're a chef in their kitchen and they're too much pride to allow someone to come and mangle their work and put their name on it and be like, yeah, I cooked that in the kitchen. Like they're too proud of their work to be able to do that. That's a good sign of a good place, but they're red flagging you as well as a customer.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to talk about the red flags next video because I think there's a lot of them and they're super duper fun. But I kind of threw around this phrase that I heard from a bright mind that I deeply respect. She calls them that your pen testing firm should be like your security therapist. Yeah. Your pen testing firm should be asking all those questions and being like, so how do you feel about your network?
Yeah. Where would you say your worst weaknesses are? What are you afraid of us finding?
What keeps you up at night?
Oh, well, yeah, that's the... Take a drink, everybody. That. Oh, I hate that question. But
it's
yeah,
question.
what's your biggest fear about what we're going to find?
Yeah.
What don't you want us to find right now?
I mean, it's important to expose known weaknesses. I will say, and I don't mean to jump ahead, but like a good pen testing firm isn't going to be like, hey, you know you have that vuln. We'll exclude it from our report.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's...
Big red flag.
Yeah, big red flag.
If you're trying to cut around and get a report that says you have a clean bill of health, and you just want a report that makes you look really good, you're not ready for a pen test. Because you're not ready for the truth.
Right. You can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think overall, you know, if you're watching this video and you're watching this video for me to have said, if you're watching this video. So if the reason you're watching this video is to at least just say, hey, I want to go find a pen test. I want to go find a firm. And, you know, I think I'm ready for this pen test. Hopefully we've answered for you a little bit of what are you getting yourself into? What types of things do you need to look out for? What things do you need to define for yourself as far as your goals, your drivers, what you're trying to get out of this, what type of pen test you're going to get, and even what do you need to even have to be able to ready, whether it's your attitude, what you know about your environment already, some of the efforts you've already taken, some of the efforts you're going to be prepared to take to actually do the pen test and to remediate it, and be involved in that conversation. If you're ready now to go to that next step, you can go to our next video when it gets published. And we'll actually go through and start talking about red flags of pen test firms. We're going to talk about how to get ready once you've ordered that pen test. How do you get ready for that pen test? How do you follow up on that pen test? And we're going to just talk about, you know, going through a pen test and starting to negotiate very important terms in contracts. How do you negotiate whether something's a critical or a high or a medium or a low? What is that? Merlot? Or a low? And how do you negotiate that with your pen test firm to be able to have a report that's going to be valuable to you? It's going to meet your objectives, and you know, it's going to be accurate. Ultimately, you want accuracy for your environment.
You hope.
Yeah.
You want accuracy. Yeah. Some other things I think we're going to talk about next time, and if you can't wait until next time, I heard that you just did a talk at Queen CityCon.
Yes.
And that had to do with CVSS and vulnerability scoring and whatnot. So, like, if you can't wait for the next video, you should check out that video. But we'll also talk about, hopefully, some green flags with your red flags. I think that would be good. Kind of crawl, walk, run.
Right.
And then I would love it if you could do some light editing for me. And if you're familiar with when you Google a restaurant, how they have dollar signs on value, I think we're going to assign some levels of effort.
Absolutely. And
give you that dollar sign. We're not pricing anything. We are not quoting.
Nope. This is not a price book. This is not your TripAdvisor. This is not your Yelp. We are not Yelping for you.
No. We are not naming any specific people.
But we will give you with dollar signs, you know, when you're starting to go into the more expensive territory versus less expensive territory.
Exactly. And I think that's important because, like, different levels of effort will get you different product. And, like, like we said, maybe you want that $1 sign. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. There's times where you just want it. I would say $1 sign, no shade, no tea, but shade. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we'll see you in that next video. But on this one, what did you think? You know, do you agree with some of the hot takes? Do you disagree with those? Do you have your own ideas? Did we miss any types of pen tests out there? Maybe you represented pen test firm. Maybe you've been doing pen testing a while. You're like, oh, I've seen this. What are some of your worst pen test stories out there? Like some of the firms that maybe don't name and shame, but what are some of the stories, the fun stories about pen tests that have gone wrong? Some of the pen tests that have gone really well, that have surprised you. Want to hear all about that down in the comments and on social media. And we'll catch you in the next one. Hack the planet!